They mocked Earth's last warning, now humanity strikes back. The Council laughed. They mocked Earth's warning, believing humanity too weak to act. But history has proven one thing. When humans are pushed to the edge, the galaxy will tremble. This is the story of what happened when they mocked Earth's last warning. The broken treaty commander Marcus Rivera stood on the bridge of the colony ship Horizon's Edge, watching stars streak past as they traveled through hyperspace. His ship carried 12,000 colonists toward what should have been humanity's newest settlement in the Vega system. For 20 years, humans had followed every rule the Galactic Council imposed. They had limited their expansion, restricted their technology development, and accepted second-class status among the stars. Marcus had believed it was worth it for peace. That belief died the moment his communications officer, Lieutenant Jamie Okonkwo, detected the distress signal. The message came from a frequency that shouldn't exist, using encryption codes that the Council had banned decades ago. Jamie's dark fingers moved across her console with practiced precision as she decoded the transmission. "Commander, you need to hear this," she said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature Marcus had never seen before. It had pale green skin that seemed to shimmer, large black eyes that reflected light like mirrors, and delicate features that spoke of a gentle civilization. The being spoke in broken universal standard, the common language of the galaxy. "Please, if anyone receives this message, we are the last of the Therians. The Zalathi Empire is hunting us. They destroyed our homeworld because we refused to surrender our medical technology. Only 300 of us remain. Our children are dying. The Council promised protection, but they have abandoned us to die." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Zalathi Empire was one of the Council's founding members, supposedly dedicated to maintaining peace and order. If they were committing genocide while the Council looked away, everything humanity had been told was a lie. "Can you trace the signal's origin?" Marcus asked, already knowing what his decision would be. Jamie nodded. "It's coming from a rogue planetoid in the Sigma Draconis system. That's deep in restricted space, Commander. If we go there, we're violating the non-interference treaty." Marcus turned to face his bridge crew. These men and women had served with him for years. They had families among the colonists, children who deserved a better future than one built on the suffering of others. "The Council has been lying to us. They speak of peace while allowing their allies to commit genocide. I won't stand by and watch innocents die." His executive officer, Commander Lin Zhao, stepped forward. She was a small woman with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. "Sir, if we violate the treaty, Earth will face consequences. The Council could declare war on all human colonies." "Then maybe it's time we stopped asking for permission to do what's right," Marcus replied. He activated the ship's intercom, his voice carrying to every deck. "Attention all colonists and crew. We have received a distress signal from refugees facing extinction. I am changing course to render assistance. I know this violates our orders, but I cannot ignore those who need our help. Anyone who objects may use the escape pods at our next stop." The response was immediate. Not a single person chose to leave. Instead, messages flooded the communication system. Doctors volunteering for medical duty, engineers offering to build shelters, teachers ready to help traumatized children. These were humans who had left Earth seeking freedom among the stars, and they understood that freedom meant nothing if it required ignoring injustice. 3 days later, the Horizon's Edge dropped out of hyperspace above a barren rock floating in the darkness between stars. The planetoid had a thin atmosphere maintained by failing life support generators. Thermal scans showed the Therian refugees huddled in underground caves, their body heat barely registering against the frozen stone. "Zalathi warships on long-range sensors," Jamie reported. 3 destroyers approaching fast. "They'll be here in 6 hours," Marcus nodded grimly. The Horizon's Edge was a colony ship with basic defensive weapons. Against 3 military destroyers, they wouldn't last 10 minutes in combat. But 6 hours was enough time to evacuate the refugees if they moved quickly. The rescue shuttles launched in waves, racing against time to reach the planet's surface. Marcus watched from the bridge as human crews worked alongside colonist volunteers to load Therian families onto the ships. The refugees were in terrible condition. Many of the children were unconscious from malnutrition. The elderly could barely walk. These people had once been doctors, scientists, and artists. Now they were victims of a genocide the galaxy's supposed peacekeepers had chosen to ignore. Dr. Amara Okafor, the colony ship's chief medical officer, reported from the planet's surface. Commander, these people have been systematically hunted for months. The Zalathi have been using them for weapons testing. I'm seeing injuries from plasma burns, gravity weapons, and something I can't even identify. It's like they've been treating these refugees as laboratory experiments. Marcus felt rage building in his chest. He had spent his entire career believing in law and order, in the idea that civilization meant following rules even when they were difficult. But what kind of civilization allowed this? As the last shuttle departed the planetoid, the Zalathi destroyers dropped out of hyperspace. Their lead ship, a sleek predator painted in the Empire's black and gold colors, immediately began broadcasting on all frequencies. Human vessel, you are interfering with a lawful military operation. The creatures you are harboring are enemies of the state. Surrender them immediately or face destruction. Marcus stood in the center of his bridge, his crew ready at their stations. He knew this moment would define not just their fate, but humanity's future in the galaxy. Zalathi vessel, these refugees are under the protection of Earth. You want them, you go through us. The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Then the Zalathi commander, a reptilian creature with scales that shifted color, appeared on the main screen. You dare challenge the authority of the Council? Your species is nothing. You have no fleet, no allies, no power. You will surrender or we will take what we want from your corpse. Marcus smiled, a cold expression that would have surprised anyone who knew him as a diplomat. You think humans are weak because we chose peace. You're about to learn how wrong you are. He turned to his weapons officer. Lieutenant Martinez, activate all defensive systems. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget. What the Zalathi didn't know was that every human ship, even colony vessels, had been quietly upgraded over the years. Hidden weapon systems that only activated in emergencies, shield generators that could withstand far more than anyone suspected, engine modifications that could push a ship beyond its supposed limits. The first Zalathi attack came in a wave of plasma fire that should have overwhelmed the colony ship's shields. Instead, the shields held, absorbing the energy and redirecting it back toward the attackers. The Horizon's Edge returned fire with railguns that fired projectiles at speeds the Zalathi shields couldn't track. One destroyer took a direct hit to its engine core and began venting atmosphere. But Marcus knew they couldn't win a prolonged battle. As the Zalathi regrouped for another attack, he made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Jamie, open a channel to Earth. Maximum encryption priority 1. When the connection established, Marcus spoke directly to Earth's military command. This is Commander Marcus Rivera. I am currently engaged with Zalathi forces while protecting refugees from genocide. The Council has failed in its most basic duty to protect innocent life. I recommend Earth activate Protocol 9. Protocol 9 had been a contingency plan for decades, a last resort if humanity ever faced existential threat. It would reveal capabilities that humans had been hiding since they first reached the stars. It would mean war with the most powerful government in the galaxy, but it would also mean that humanity would finally stop asking permission to exist. The response came from Admiral Sarah Chen herself, Supreme Commander of Earth's Hidden Fleet. Commander Rivera, your message has been received. Earth stands with you. Protocol 9 is now active. Hold your position. Reinforcements are already on their way. Across human space, ships that had appeared to be simple cargo haulers and research vessels began revealing their true nature. Weapon systems that had been concealed for years powered up. Communication networks that the Council didn't know existed came online. Humanity had learned from history that those who wanted peace had to prepare for war. The Zalathi commander must have received intelligence about what was happening because his expression changed from arrogance to something like fear. You don't know what you're doing. The Council will crush your entire species for this defiance. Marcus stood tall on his bridge, surrounded by his crew, protecting hundreds of refugees who had nowhere else to turn. Then let them come. Humanity has given its final warning. We asked for peace and you gave us oppression. We asked for justice and you gave us genocide. Now you'll learn what happens when you push a peaceful species too far. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment everything changed. The moment humanity stopped being observers and became the force that would reshape the galaxy. The Hidden Arsenal Captain Yuki Tanaka received the Protocol 9 activation while her ship, the Silent Phoenix, was pretending to be a deep space mining vessel near Proxima Centauri. For 5 years, she and her crew had been extracting minerals from asteroids while secretly building something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. All hands. This is the captain, Yuki announced over the intercom. Protocol 9 is active. Our masquerade is over. It's time to show them who we really are. The transformation was immediate. Hidden panels across the Silent Phoenix's hull slid open, revealing weapon arrays that no mining ship should possess. The cargo bays that supposedly held ore were actually filled with fighter craft, each one equipped with technology that violated dozens of council regulations. The crew members who had been posing as miners removed their work clothes to reveal military uniforms they had been waiting years to wear openly. Yuki's first officer, Commander David Park, pulled up the tactical display showing their sector of space. Captain, we have 7 council monitoring stations within range. They'll detect our weapons the moment we power them up fully. Then let's make sure they have something more important to worry about. Yuki replied. She activated the quantum communication system that connected all hidden human military assets. This is Captain Tanaka to all ships in Sector 7. The time for hiding is over. Operation Revelation begins now. Across the sector, 17 other disguised human vessels began their own transformations. The Council had always wondered how humans managed their logistics with such a small official fleet. They were about to discover that humanity's real fleet had been hiding in plain sight all along. Lieutenant Sofia Rodriguez, the ship's science officer, reported from her station. Captain, I'm detecting Council reinforcements moving toward Commander Rivera's position. 3 full battle groups, including a dreadnought. At their current speed, they'll reach him in 4 hours. Yuki studied the tactical display. The Council was sending enough firepower to destroy a small planet, all to crush one colony ship that had dared to save refugees. But they had made a critical error. They assumed humans would face them alone. Signal the Therian refugee ship in our protection, Yuki ordered. Ask them if they'd like to send a message to their scattered people. The Therian elder who appeared on screen was different from the dying refugees Rivera had saved. This one had been hiding in human space for months, slowly recovering strength. Captain Tanaka, my people have dreamed of this day. Yes, we will send the message. Every Therian still alive will know that humanity stands against the Council's tyranny. Within hours, the secret networks that connected oppressed species across the galaxy came alive with unprecedented activity. The Korvath, whose homeworld had been strip-mined by Council corporations, began sabotaging mining operations. The Altarians, forced into servitude as translators and administrators, started feeding false intelligence to their masters. The Nexari, brilliant engineers who had been prohibited from developing their own technology, began sharing their knowledge with human scientists. Dr. Kenji Matsumoto, working in a secret laboratory beneath Mars's surface, received data packets from dozens of alien scientists who had been forced to hide their research for generations. My God, he whispered to his team. The Nexari have been developing gravitational manipulation in secret for 50 years. The Therians have medical technology that could cure diseases we haven't even discovered yet. The Council has been suppressing scientific advancement across the entire galaxy. But the real shock came when the warrior caste of Darren made contact. These were beings who had once been the galaxy's greatest military force before the Council had defeated them, in a war 3 centuries ago. Since then, they had been forced to serve as enforcers for Council law, their proud warrior tradition reduced to mere policing. General Thax of the Darren appeared on Yuki's communication screen. He was a massive creature, standing 3 meters tall with 4 arms and skin like living armor. Captain Tanaka, my people have waited 300 years for someone to stand against the Council. We offer our blades to humanity's cause. General, the Council will brand you as traitors, Yuki warned. The Darren warrior's expression might have been a smile. Captain, we were traitors the moment they made us slaves. Today we reclaim our honor. The Battle of Kepler Station became the first major engagement of what historians would later call the Liberation War. The Council had sent their forces to crush Marcus Rivera and make an example of humanity's defiance. Instead, they flew into a carefully orchestrated trap. Yuki's squadron emerged from hyperspace behind the Council fleet, just as they were preparing to attack Rivera's position. The Council ships, confident in their numerical superiority, didn't expect the mining vessels and cargo haulers they had been tracking for years to suddenly unleash weapons that shouldn't exist. Fire everything, Yuki ordered. The human ships released their first surprise, swarm missiles equipped with AI guidance systems that could think and adapt in real time. The Council's point defense systems, designed to counter predictable projectile paths, couldn't handle weapons that actively learned and evolved their attack patterns. Admiral Krex of the Council Dreadnought Supremacy watched his tactical display in disbelief as his escort vessels began taking damage from weapons that seemed to phase through their shields. "What technology is this?" Our intelligence said humans were barely capable of interstellar travel. His science officer, a insectoid Valexian, chittered nervously. "Admiral, these weapons are using quantum entanglement to bypass our shields entirely. This is technology we theorized but never developed because the Council banned the research. The truth was that humanity had spent 40 years learning from every species they encountered. While the Council had been content with their technological superiority, humans had been innovating, combining different scientific traditions in ways no one had imagined possible. But the real surprise came when the Darren warriors struck. General Thax's fleet, officially on patrol to maintain order, suddenly turned their weapons on the Council ships they were supposed to be protecting. The Supremacy found itself caught between human innovation and Darren fury, a combination that even the galaxy's most powerful warship couldn't withstand. Meanwhile, on the horizon's edge, Marcus Rivera watched the battle unfold while protecting the Therian refugees. The colonists had transformed the cargo bays into temporary shelters, and human doctors worked around the clock to save alien lives. It was a scene that would have been impossible under Council law, but it represented everything humanity believed in. Dr. Amara Okafor reported from the medical bay. "Commander, the Therian children are responding well to treatment. One of them asked me why humans are helping them when the Council said we were dangerous primitives. What did you tell them?" Marcus asked. "I told them that humans have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We choose to be good people." The battle turned decisively when Captain Elena Vasquez arrived with the Third Fleet. These were ships that had been built in secret shipyards hidden in asteroid fields and remote moons. The Council had monitored Earth's official shipyards, never realizing that humanity's real manufacturing capability was scattered across dozens of hidden facilities. "This is Captain Vasquez to all Council forces," Elena broadcast. "You have one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons and you'll be treated according to the laws of war. Continue fighting, and we'll show you why humanity survived on a death world for millions of years before reaching the stars." Some Council ships surrendered immediately. Their crews had joined out of duty or circumstance, not conviction. But others, particularly those commanded by species that had benefited from Council oppression, fought to the end. The Supremacy itself became a floating hulk after its power core was destroyed by a coordinated strike from human and Darren forces. Admiral Krex, wounded but alive, was taken prisoner along with his command staff. He would later testify at the war crimes trials about the Council's systematic oppression of developing species. As news of the victory spread, something unprecedented happened across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, oppressed species began rising up against their Council overseers. The revolution that had started with one commander's decision to save refugees had become a galactic awakening. The Liberation War Admiral Rachel Foster stood in the command center of Starbase Freedom, humanity's secret military headquarters hidden within Jupiter's moon Ganymede. The base had been under construction for 30 years, disguised as a scientific research station studying the moon's subsurface ocean. In reality, it was the nerve center of humanity's resistance movement. The holographic display before her showed the entire galaxy, with different colors representing the rapidly shifting allegiances of various species. What had started as humanity's defiance had triggered something the Council never anticipated, a galaxy-wide uprising of oppressed civilizations. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from 17 sectors," her intelligence officer, Colonel James Washington, announced. "The prison world of Kalos Nafin has been liberated by local resistance forces. The Zephrani have seized control of 3 Council weapons depots. The aquatic Bendathi have destroyed the underwater bases the Council forced them to build." Rachel nodded, her weathered face showing satisfaction mixed with concern. The Liberation War was spreading faster than anyone had predicted, but that also meant it could spiral out of control. "What about civilian casualties?" "Minimal so far, Admiral. The resistance groups are following the guidelines we transmitted. They're targeting military and government installations only, offering surrender terms to anyone who lays down arms." This was crucial to Rachel's strategy. Humanity couldn't be seen as conquerors replacing the Council's tyranny with their own. They had to be liberators, showing the galaxy a different path forward. Commander Yoshida entered the command center with urgent news. Admiral, we've decoded a Council transmission. They're mobilizing their strategic reserve fleet from the core worlds, 500 ships including 7 dreadnoughts. They're planning to make an example of Earth itself. Rachel had expected this. The Council's strategy had always been to rule through fear, destroying any species that challenged their authority as a warning to others. But they had made a critical miscalculation. They assumed Earth was humanity's only weakness. Time to show them how wrong they are, Rachel said. Activate Operation Archipelago. Across human space, something remarkable began to happen. Colony worlds that the Council had dismissed as insignificant suddenly revealed massive defense installations. Space stations that had been registered as research facilities deployed military-grade shields and weapons. Even individual colonists activated personal defense systems that had been distributed in secret over the years. The Council had always wondered why humans spread out so quickly across the galaxy, establishing small colonies on barely habitable worlds. Now they understood. Every human settlement was a fortress. Every colonist was a potential soldier. Humanity had learned from their history that centralized civilizations were vulnerable, so they had become something else entirely. A distributed civilization where destroying one world, even Earth, wouldn't break their spirit. Meanwhile, the siege of the Council's fortress world had begun. The planet Supremacy Prime had been the seat of Council power for 3 millennia, protected by layers of defensive satellites, energy shields that could withstand supernovas, and a fleet that had never known defeat. Captain Marcus Rivera, promoted to admiral after his actions that started the war, led the assault. His fleet was a mixture of human ships and vessels from liberated species. The Therian refugees he had saved served as medical officers. Terran warriors manned assault craft. Nexari engineers had modified weapons beyond their original specifications. This is Admiral Rivera to the people of Supremacy Prime. He broadcast on all frequencies. We are not here to destroy you. We are here to end the system that has oppressed billions. Surrender and you will be treated fairly. Resist, and face the combined fury of every species you have wronged. The Council's response came from High Chancellor Vorthak, the ancient being who had ruled the galaxy for 500 years. His image appeared on every screen, his crystalline form radiating authority that had made entire species bow in submission. You primitive creatures dare attack the heart of civilization itself? We brought order to chaos. We ended the wars that plagued the galaxy. Without us, you will destroy yourselves within a generation. Admiral Rachel Foster, connecting from Starbase Freedom, appeared alongside Rivera's image. High Chancellor, you ended wars by enslaving everyone who might fight. You brought order by crushing anyone who thought differently. That's not civilization. That's tyranny. The battle for Supremacy Prime was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Council's defenses were formidable, but they were designed to fight the kind of war that had existed for millennia. Massive fleets exchanging fire in predictable patterns. They weren't prepared for human creativity combined with the desperate fury of freed slaves. The Bendati, aquatic beings who could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods, infiltrated defense stations by swimming through space itself, something the Council never thought possible. The Korvath used their mining expertise to tunnel through asteroid defenses, creating passages for assault teams. The Zafrani, natural telepaths who had been forbidden from using their abilities, coordinated attacks with precision that no technology could match. But perhaps the most shocking moment came when parts of the Council's own fleet switched sides mid-battle. These were ships crewed by species that had been forced into Council service, who had been waiting for any chance at freedom. When that chance came, they took it without hesitation. Commander Lin Zhao, leading a strike force to disable the planet's shield generators, reported a remarkable discovery. Admiral Rivera, we found something in the underground bunkers. Historical archives that the Council kept hidden. The truth about how they came to power. The records revealed that the Council hadn't brought peace to a warring galaxy as they claimed. They had actually caused many of the wars, manipulating species into fighting each other, then stepping in as peacekeepers when both sides were exhausted. It was a pattern they had repeated for thousands of years, creating the very chaos they claimed to solve. Dr. Amara Okafor, now serving as the Liberation Alliance's chief humanitarian officer, coordinated the evacuation of civilians from Supremacy Prime. "We're not the Council," she told her teams. "Every civilian, regardless of species or previous allegiance, gets evacuated to safety. We're fighting a system, not people." This approach had an unexpected effect. Council forces that had been preparing to fight to the death began surrendering when they realized their families would be protected. Entire defensive sectors simply stopped fighting when their commanders understood that defeat didn't mean extermination. The turning point came when General Thax challenged the Council's military commander to single combat, invoking an ancient tradition that predated the Council itself. Commander Zurchin, a six-limbed warrior from a species that had ruled through strength for millennia, couldn't refuse without losing all credibility. The duel was broadcast across the galaxy. Two warriors, each representing different visions of the galaxy's future, faced each other in the Council's Great Assembly Hall. Thax fought not just with strength, but with the fury of 3 centuries of oppression. When he finally stood victorious, the symbolism was clear to everyone watching. The old order had fallen. High Chancellor Vorthak's final message before surrendering was telling. "You think you've won, but you've only destroyed order itself. Without central authority, the galaxy will descend into chaos." Admiral Rivera's response would be remembered throughout history. "We haven't destroyed order, Chancellor. We've destroyed your order. Now we'll build something better. Together." A new galaxy. The Constitutional Convention took place on Haven, a world specifically chosen because it had never been colonized by any major power. Representatives from 93 species gathered in a vast amphitheater built by combined human, Darren, and Nixari engineering. It was a structure that would have been impossible under the old system, where different species were prohibited from sharing advanced technology. Admiral Rachel Foster, now serving as humanity's chief representative, stood before the assembled delegates. She had aged visibly during the war, her hair now completely gray, but her eyes held the fierce determination that had carried humanity through its darkest hours. "We stand at a crossroads," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the amphitheater. "We can repeat the mistakes of the past, creating a new council that will eventually become as corrupt as the old one. Or we can build something that has never existed in this galaxy, a true democracy where every voice matters." The debates that followed were passionate, sometimes heated. The Darren wanted a military meritocracy. The Nixari favored a technocracy run by scientists. The Bendathi proposed a system based on environmental harmony. Some species wanted to punish former council members harshly. Others argued for reconciliation. It was Marcus Rivera, the commander whose rescue of refugees had started everything, who proposed the solution that would define the new galactic order. "Why must we choose a single system? Let each species govern themselves as they see fit, but create a federation for matters that affect everyone. Mutual defense, trade, scientific cooperation, and protecting fundamental rights." The Free World's Charter, as it came to be known, established principles that seemed revolutionary after millennia of centralized control. Each species retained sovereignty over their own worlds. No civilization could impose its values on another. Scientific knowledge would be freely shared. Any being, regardless of species, had the right to travel, trade, and settle wherever they were welcome. Dr. Kenji Matsumoto led the establishment of the Galactic Science Collective, where researchers from all species could collaborate without restrictions. Within the first year, they made breakthroughs that had been impossible under the Council's compartmentalized system. The Therian medical knowledge combined with human genetics research produced cures for diseases that had plagued entire species. Nixari engineering merged with Darren materials science created ships that could travel faster than anyone had imagined. Captain Yuki Tanaka took command of the Peacekeeper Force, a volunteer military organization drawn from all species, dedicated to preventing any single power from dominating others. Unlike the Council's enforcement fleets, these forces answered to democratic oversight and operated under strict rules of engagement that prioritized protection of civilians above all else. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation happened on Earth itself. The planet that the Council had dismissed as a death world full of dangerous primitives became the galaxy's symbol of resilience and hope. Cities that had been preparing for war were converted into centers of learning and culture. The hidden military bases became museums. teaching future generations about the price of freedom and the importance of vigilance. The war crimes trials that followed were conducted with a fairness that surprised even former council members. High Chancellor Vorthak and other leaders were held accountable for genocide and oppression, but lower-ranking officials who had been forced to participate were offered amnesty in exchange for testimony. The goal wasn't vengeance but justice, and more importantly, ensuring such atrocities could never happen again. Some council loyalists fled to the galaxy's outer regions, establishing holdout colonies and vowing to restore the old order. But without the infrastructure of oppression that had supported their rule, these remnants gradually either surrendered or faded into irrelevance. A year after the war's end, Marcus Rivera stood in the same spot where he had made the decision to save the Therian refugees. But now, instead of a desperate plea for help, his communication screen showed something different. A thriving Therian colony, their cities rebuilt with help from human engineers, their children playing in schools where they learned alongside human kids. The Therian elder who had sent that original distress signal appeared on the screen. "Admiral Rivera, I wanted you to see what your courage created. Not just for my people, but for everyone. You showed the galaxy that one person standing up for what's right can change everything." Marcus smiled, thinking of all the beings who had made freedom possible. It wasn't just me. It was every human who chose to help, every species that chose to resist, every being who decided that freedom was worth fighting for. 5 years after the Liberation War, the galaxy looked completely different. Trade routes that had been restricted for millennia were now open to all. Worlds that had been kept deliberately primitive were experiencing technological renaissance. Species that had been enemies for generations were working together on joint colonies. There were challenges, certainly. Some species struggled with self-governance after centuries of external control. Economic disparities created tensions. Cultural misunderstandings led to conflicts that required careful mediation. But these were the problems of free beings making their own choices, not the systematic oppression of the past. Dr. Amara Okafor established the Interspecies Medical Alliance, ensuring that no being would die from treatable diseases simply because their species lacked political power. Her clinic, staffed by volunteers from dozens of species, became symbols of the new galactic order: cooperation through choice, not coercion. The Darren warrior tradition, instead of being used for oppression, was transformed into a galactic emergency response force. When natural disasters struck any world, Darren warriors were among the first to arrive, using their strength to save lives rather than take them. The Nexari established universities on hundreds of worlds, teaching not just their advanced engineering, but the critical thinking skills that the Council had suppressed. They believed, as humans did, that education was the best defense against future tyranny. Commander Lin Zhao, who had fought in the crucial battles of the war, now served as an ambassador to formerly isolated species. She helped them integrate into the galactic community at their own pace, ensuring they weren't overwhelmed by sudden change. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed humanity. No longer were they seen as dangerous primitives to be contained. Instead, they were recognized as the species that had risked everything to free others. Earth's example showed that a civilization's worth wasn't measured by how long it had existed or how much power it wielded, but by its willingness to stand up for justice. The anniversary of the Liberation War became a galactic holiday, not to celebrate violence, but to remember the price of freedom and the importance of vigilance against tyranny. On Earth, monuments were erected not just to human heroes, but to every being who had fought for liberation. High school students across the galaxy studied the revolution of conscience, as historians called it. They learned how a single act of compassion, one commander's decision to save refugees, had toppled an empire that seemed invincible. They studied the tactics and strategies, but more importantly, they learned the principles that had driven the revolution: that all sentient beings deserved freedom, that diversity was strength, and that true peace could only come from justice. Admiral Rachel Foster, in her final speech before retirement, stood before the Galactic Assembly and said words that would be remembered for generations. The Council ruled through fear, believing that beings would only cooperate under threat. We proved them wrong. Given the choice, most beings choose cooperation over conflict, freedom over security, and hope over fear. That's not just human nature, that's the nature of all sentient life. As she spoke, The assembly hall was filled with beings from across the galaxy. Tall Darren warriors standing beside diminutive Nexari engineers, aquatic Bendathian mobile tanks next to crystalline Valexians and dozens of other species, all united not by force but by choice. The Council had ignored Earth's final warning because they believed humans were too weak to matter. They had forgotten that strength wasn't just about weapons or fleets. Sometimes the greatest strength was the courage to say no more to injustice, even when the odds seemed impossible. Humanity hadn't conquered the galaxy. They had liberated it, and in doing so, they had shown every species that freedom wasn't something granted by authority. It was something claimed by those brave enough to fight for it. The old galaxy, ruled by fear and oppression, was gone. In its place stood a federation of free worlds, each different, each sovereign, but all united by the principle that tyranny in any form would never again be tolerated. Earth's children had reached for the stars and found them full of beings just like them, creatures yearning for freedom, dignity, and the right to determine their own destiny. Together, they had built something the Council never could have imagined. A galaxy where diversity was celebrated, where cooperation was voluntary, and where every voice, no matter how small, had the right to be heard. The age of empires was over. The age of freedom had begun,